Many years ago, when I first came to New York, I used to commute every week. And every week I would go back on the Amtrak, and I always would have another story to tell. Because the person sat next to me, most times were not Jewish. And when I travel, I always have a sefer with me. And the conversation always would begin, and this is what people spoke to one another. When you sat next to a person, your person say, will be inquisitive, you say, uh, is that a Hebrew book? I say, yes. Are you a rabbi? Yes. And then they say, we have a question. And they ask a question. So one of these trips, this person, he was going to Washington, D.C. I was getting off from Baltimore. He says, I want to ask you a question. I have many friends that are anti-Semites. I'm not an anti-Semite. Could you explain to me why they're anti-Semites? Why is the anti-Semitism? That's why he asked me. So I told him, I said, I'll explain it at two levels. I said, there's a verse in Prophets where the Jewish people are referred to as the boulder of Israel. The Jewish people are like a boulder, large boulder. And the rabbis teach us why we depict it as the large boulder, because in the medieval times, there was a test of strength that if you were able to lift this boulder, could have weighed a number of tons, and you were able to lift it over your head, you would win a purse of gold. And for hundreds of years, they called them he-men, very strong people, they tried to lift a boulder, nobody succeeded. Why? Because a boulder of that dimension, if you lift it, either you can't get it off the ground, and even if you get it off the ground, if you get it up to a certain height, if you're not able to throw it away from yourself, you get crushed by the boulder. So through all these centuries, all these very strong people, they tackled the boulder, but rather than them tackling the boulder crushed them. And nobody's able to win the purse of gold. So the Medrash says, you have all the civilizations. They tried to destroy the Jewish people, whether it was Babylon, the Babylonians, whether it was the Persians and the Medes, whether it was the Greeks. They couldn't succeed. Rather than them destroying us, they were destroyed through us. This is why the Jewish people are referred to as the boulder. They tried to tackle the boulder, but rather than them tackling the boulder destroyed them. So all these civilizations were destroyed through Jewish people, according to Midrash, verbatim. So therefore, every generation that says, you couldn't do it, we're going to do it. It's almost, the Jewish people are seen by the world as defiant. You people are defiant people. You have such arrogance, such chutzpah. You know how many civilizations went down because of you people? Everybody tries to destroy you, and you, small numbers, you fickle nobodies, you destroyed they couldn't, we're going to prove we can. It's almost, they see it as defiance. The Jews are a defiant people. We can't get rid of them. We're going to get rid of them. It's like an arrogance. They see the Jews arrogant because of that. Despite everything, they continue. You can't get rid of that virus. You can't get rid of that disease. That's what they can't tolerate. That's the way the Medrash says it. But there's another Medrash, explicit, that it says, every generation says, Esav made a mistake. First it says Yishmael made a mistake. Then it says Esav made a mistake. Then the Egyptians made a mistake. Then the Babylonians made a mistake. Because if they would have seen it differently, they would have destroyed them. Finally, the Romans come, and they say, we're not going to make the mistake of all the previous civilizations. We're going to destroy them. But they always make a mistake. Therefore, the next generation says, we're not going to be as foolish as they, we will destroy them. And that's the history repeating itself over and over ago, until the end of time, until the coming Mashiach. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron HaKohen. Heshiv is Chamosi. He diffused my wrath. He turned back my wrath. Mal b'nei Yisrael. that was upon the Jewish people. We read last week there was a plague due to the story with the Baal Peor. 24,000 Jews died in that plague. And it's only because of, so initially Aaron had taken Pinchas had taken the spear and he pierced Zimri ben Solu, who was the prince of the tribe of Shimon, and Cosbi bat Sur, who was the princess. And after that, we'll discuss in a minute what it says, this supposed to kill him. So because he went and he did this act of zealotry, Bekanus Kinosi, he was zealous for my zealousness, Besocham, Velochilisis Bnei Yisrael, Bekanus Kinosi. And the reason why I did not consume and destroy the Jewish people, because he avenged my vengeance. So let's take a look at Rashi. Normally, when we identify a person, pedigree-wise, we only go back one generation. Why do we go back 2 generations? It's always in question. Right? We find by Betzalel, right? We go Betzalel ben Uri ben Chur Lamati Yehuda. The one who oversaw the building of the Mishkan, he's Betzalel ben Uri, but we trace it back to the 3rd generation, Chur. Who was Chur? Chur is the son of Miriam. So Betzalel was a grandson of Chur. Why is the Torah telling us there that he was the grandson of Chur? Because Chur, at the time of the Egel, initially, when the rabble initiated the Egel, Chur stood up and he protested. What did they do? They killed him. They killed Chur. So Betzalel was a grandson of Chur. So why is that important for us to know here? So the Medrash explains, Betzalel, when he oversaw the Mishkan, he was endowed with a special level of understanding, divine wisdom, understanding. He knew exactly how to conjugate the letters that bring about creation. But why? He's a young boy. Why did he merit this? So the Medrash says, much about David, what is it now? There's 2. You have a general who fought many battles for a king, and he brought much glory to the king. And then the king decides in his mind, he doesn't even discuss with general. When he comes back from the next battle, he's going to reward him with the king's jewels, even though he's a commoner, to show his appreciation. What happens? That general's killed in battle. So what does he do? He feels that he owes it to the family. So he finds the grandson of that general and he rewards him handsomely for what the grandfather deserved. Chur stood up, would not allow the Egel to be done. And he was killed. Because Betzalel was his grandson, therefore he merited this endowment of understanding of the inner workings of existence, divine wisdom at every level, and he oversaw the building of the Mishkan, which was a reinstatement of the Jewish people. That's why the Torah over there traces the pedigree to Chur. Over here, Pinchas ben Elos ben Aaron HaKohen. It's not Pinchas ben Elos. What do we have to trace it all back to Aaron HaKohen? So Rashi cites Chazal. Lefi shoyu shvotim b'vaznoso. Because the tribes, they were disgracing Pinchas. What did they say? Hereisim ben Puti zeh. Have you seen Ben Puti, this person? But Pinchas was a grandson of Yisro. Yisro initially was an idolater. And he fattened calves for idolatry. So he's the grandson of Ben Puti zeh. Shepitim aviimo agolim avodah zorah. The father, his mother, Elazar married Yisro's another daughter of Yisro. He fattened calves for avodah zorah. V'horag nosi shev Yisrael. This man, with this pedigree of an idolater, he killed a prince. Lefir ba'akos of Yisrael Aaron. So therefore, the Torah goes and traces his pedigree to Aaron. Don't look at his maternal side, look at his paternal side. His paternal side is one of a kind. He's the grandson of Aaron. But until then, they were mavaznos. They were disgracing him. The man comes from gangsters. That's why he did what he did. He killed the prince of Israel. So they say, he may have that's the maternal, but look what the paternal side. It's Aaron. Therefore, what exactly is going over here? I always ask the question. I'm not sure if Alan will remember this. A person's about to walk in the way of a bus off the curb, and if he walks in the front of the bus, he'll be crushed to death. And a homeless man goes and pulls him away from the path of the bus and saves his life. Is the person going to say, "You subhuman being, you're homeless, nobody. Would you have a right to save him?" I mean, here we're talking about the existence of the Jewish people is at stake. If Pinchas wouldn't have done what he did, God would have destroyed the Jewish people. It's all because he avenged God's vengeance. So it's a rebel where he comes from. So he came from his paternal side was from an idolater. And besides, Yisrael became a tzaddik. He came and he represented, he's the one who suggested the whole judicial system. But that wasn't enough. But what's even the basis for the claim? He saved the day, he saved the Jewish people. How do we understand it? Just a simple understanding. The facts like this is what people themselves, everybody has a certain degree of conscience. And sometimes when we fail, there's a question, why did we fail? And here, there's a level of Chil Hashem taking place. This man openly is cohabiting with a non-Jewish woman, a princess. He's defying Moshe Rabbeinu, and other people are participating in this idolatry, and nobody's saying a word. I mean, here you have a public Chil Hashem going on, and the plague is starting, and nobody's reacting, nobody's responding. It's unheard of. So how do you stop the plague? Only one way. You have to go and somehow kill the perpetrator, the one who precipitated the whole story here. Zimri. Zimri is the prince of Shimon. You have to have a certain degree of, and not only that, the Medrash tells us that Pinchas, what he did, his act of zealotry, he merited many, many miracles because he should have been killed. Because he had a whole security group there. And even if he could kill Zimri, he should have been killed afterwards. But he was protected every step of the way and the way everything happened. But the question is, everybody asks themselves the question, why did he do it? Why didn't we do it? Why didn't we do it? You know what the answer is? We have to look for an answer. You know what the answer is? He comes from gangsters. Gangsters, for them to kill someone means nothing. We come from a pure pedigree. Because we have a pure pedigree, we have certain sensitivities, and those sensitivities that would not allow us to behave in that manner. But since this is his background, pedigree-wise, he comes from those kind of people, therefore it's within his gene pool, he has the ability to do these things. Because he comes from a person who fattened calves for idolatry. That's the reason. So it's not they're accusing him of something. They have to justify why they themselves did not act as Pinchas acted. And they have a satisfying answer. He comes from idolaters, we don't. But that's not the answer. That's disgraceful to say that's the reason why he did it, why he was able to react, to eradicate the Chil Hashem. And they didn't. Ben Aaron. Now, why did people have difficulty even approaching Zimri? Zimri's a prince, and she's a princess. And despite that, people are to engage people who are another echelon of representation, of status, it's not so easy to approach those people. So they said, why Pinchas could do it now? Because he was of equal status. As much as Zimri was the prince of Shimon, he has a princely pedigree. His grandfather was Aaron. So now we understand. So now they don't have to see it in the negative to understand why Pinchas could do it, what they didn't do. They said, why he was able to do it? Because he's of equal status as Zimri. If that's the case, they're relieved of the guilt. But the Torah says that's not the reason. The reason is because Kinosi, because he was a true zealot. It had nothing to do with pedigree, it had nothing to do with anything. Because Pinchas understood what was happening, and it was a level of desecration of Hashem's name, he wasn't able to tolerate it. And that's why he reacted. Has nothing to do with being prince, being anything, means nothing. If there's a Chil Hashem, you eradicate it, you destroy it immediately. So they were coming from their vantage point. There's always, we had earlier, last week we had, Bilam hitched his own donkey. Avram Avinu hitched his donkey. Avram hitched his donkey, was going to the Akedah. Bilam was hitching his donkey when he was going to curse the Jewish people. So there are two takeaways. I mean, Avram Avinu was 137 years at the time of the Akedah. He was one of the wealthiest people in the world. And you'd think if he has to hitch his donkey, he has to do it himself. He could have had one of his servants, his slaves, hitch his donkey. Bilam was a man, as it says, Rucha Gavoa. He literally suffered megalomania. As much as he had of acknowledgement, honor, everything, it was never enough. And he himself is hitching his own donkey. It's unheard of. How does he allow himself to do such a lowly task? Takeaway is, Chazal tell us, Avram Avinu's Ava Mekalkel Zashura. Love overrides protocol. Bilam hate, rabid hate overrides protocol. What does that mean? What that means is, as we explained, that a person who's consumed with love, all he sees at that moment, the love for Hashem, all that exists at that moment is doing God's will. At that moment, Avram doesn't exist. His wealth doesn't exist. The world doesn't exist. Only one thing exists. The objective is due to will of Hashem. That's the level of negation because of the overwhelming love. Bilam, whatever he was, at that moment, his hate was so intense. All that mattered at that moment, the Jews have to be eradicated. They have to be annihilated. As a result of that, he was consumed. At that moment, all that existed. Bilam didn't exist. All that existed at that moment was the eradication, annihilation of Jewish people. That's what it's about. If a person has that level of commitment to God, it's irrelevant whether you're a prince, it's irrelevant she's a princess, it's irrelevant nowhere, it's irrelevant that you may be killed. Nothing matters. All that matters is we have to somehow expunge and stop the Chil Hashem. And that was the truth about Pinchas. He was the true zealot. It's not because he was of equal standing, because he was the grandson of Aaron. That's an explanation to the people. But the reality is Hashem says, I attest, he was Kinus Kinosi. He avenged my vengeance for the same reason. As I can't tolerate it, I wouldn't have tolerated. He could not tolerate it. That's the understanding. In the early part of the 20th century in Baltimore, and somehow someone had influence on him, and he went to learn in Slobodka Yeshiva in Lithuania, in Kovna. He went to Europe, and he became not only a great Talmud Chacham, he was a great tzaddik, great influencer within the Torah world. He wrote many books, he's lectured, he said shiurim, besides being in yeshiva, to the public. So there's a story in the 50s, and he was a little bit of a zealot. There was a rabbi. He was, I don't know what kind of rabbi he was. I think he was an Orthodox rabbi, but his perspective of and his understanding of Judaism wasn't so on par. And he had certain heretical views, and he's speaking to a crowd, 200 people. There's some kind of dinner, and he's speaking, and he's spewing heretical concepts to the people. And in those days, you know, we're talking about they're innocent people. They don't know any better. People weren't that educated Jewishly, and he's a rabbi. And these people are being victimized by hearing this kind of talk. Rabbi Vigdavil goes up to the lectern where this rabbi's there. And he whistles and he says, I want to explain you something. What you're saying is unacceptable. You're saying heresy. Yeah, this archaic looking man comes up to him, a man with a black coat, with a beard and a black cap, and he ignores him. So he says to him, I want to explain something. You have to stop. You can't continue. Ignores him. Rabbi Vigdavil goes back to his seat and he continues. He goes up again. He says, I want to explain you something. You continue a little bit more, I will take you down from the podium. He will not continue. Ignored him. He did it a third time. Rav Miller went up to the podium, grabbed him by his collar, pulled him off. You tell me who could have done that. He said, he has guts, right? What if he has guts? It has nothing to do with guts. Because he was a man who lived for one purpose, and he saw this as innocent people being victimized, hearing this kind of radical talk, he could not tolerate it. Had nothing to do with, but he's a rabbi. What about the people seeing it? You're going to look like who knows what, like you're an unstable person. Who could do this kind of thing? To have Rav Miller didn't make a difference. If this continues, he will not tolerate it. Because all these Jews are being victimized by this heretical talk. He took them off the podium. And that was the end of the speaker. Why did Aaron participate in gathering the gold for the Edom? Why? Because his nephew Hur was killed.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, he saw exactly where things were at, that if he opposes them, he's going to be killed.
Mm-hmm.
And because he did the wrong thing, Aaron. Because he should have allowed himself to be killed. Because he said, I'm a Kohen and Novi, and if they kill me, the Jews will never be atoned. But if Hur wouldn't have been killed, Aaron would have done it. He would have protested, because he didn't realize to what degree they would react. But after he saw to what degree they reacted, that Hur was killed, he understood they would kill him, even though he's the brother of Moshe. They would kill him. But if that's the case, there's no Jewish people. So he, for the sake of God, participated, even though he did the wrong thing. And because of that, he lost 2 sons. Aaron lost 2 sons. 2 of his sons died, and they were not protected in his merit. None of them view. As we explained, that's why they had that blind spot. They made that mistake. So it's all God orchestrating things that Hur was not protected to be killed. So Aaron now has a choice. What's his choice? Does he protest and he's also killed? Or does he participate, and there's a degree of culpability till the end of time that we say, the goal represents something which is a prosecuting representation. And many things happen. This is all God orchestrating settings of choice, that choice has to take place for the ultimate coming to the end of time, where the world will achieve a level of perfection.
Mm-hmm.
The Kanos Kinosi, Binoko Eskin Nikmosi, he avenged my vengeance. The Kotzlos Haketzev, Shoel. He expressed the anger which I would have expressed. A person who's agitated, and therefore he reacts, he avenges whatever it is. Meaning, let's say Pinchas would have done it, and he would have had some kind of another ulterior motive. Why did it? He wouldn't have achieved what he was supposed to achieve. Meaning, the same, what would have Kaviyach upset God, the intolerance of what it was, Pinchas, as a human being, experienced that same intolerance. He experienced identical anger. It came from that pure place. Only because it came from that pure place, that's why the achievement of that was that the Jewish people were not annihilated. But if it would have been any less than that, it wouldn't have been sufficient. Okay? That's what that, and God is attesting to this fact. Some people, they do acts of zealotry because they're looking for opportunities to be zealots. That's not what Pinchas is about. He's not a zealot. It's only because the event caused him to react or respond as a zealot. And Hashem is attesting to this fact. Okay. Ready to start the Chumash.